Peace, peace, peace. It's your boy Carlos Parks. I guess this is my first time doing one of my fair time tales, fair time stories. I'm sorry, from my car. I had the idea, I've spent a lot of time in my vehicle, traveling back and forth because I'm a real estate agent, among other things, right? But what I like to do on social media is share my videos of my 17 years of traveling with inside the criminal justice system in federal prison. While I was incarcerated in federal prison, so I took a page out of the playbook of a couple guys that I see on social media who share prison stories, and one of those being Joe Baker, guy out of Tennessee. Loved his stories. Loved the way he told his stories. He's a master storyteller. And Bill Feasy, he's another master storyteller. These are two of the guys that I watch. If there's anybody else, I don't watch them. I'm not familiar with the other people. I'm pretty sure there are other people, but I was influenced by Joe Baker and Bill Feasy. So shout out to those two guys. Now, I'm going to get into my fair time story. Unlike these guys, those guys were in state prison. One was in Tennessee and the other was in Georgia. So I pretty much feel like I know everything about those systems because of listening to those guys, right? I like the way they break down and explain certain things. So I'm going to talk about something that occurred when I was at Petersburg Low. I've talked about my time at Beckley, West Virginia, which was an FCI. I talked about my time at Cumberland, Maryland, which is an FCI. And then I told some stories about my time in Petersburg, which is another FCI. I'm from Virginia, so Petersburg was basically home base for me. Unlike state systems, federal inmates are housed all over the United States. So I've been all over. When I was in Petersburg, I was home. And it was the better part of my incarceration because I had, when you're at home, you get more visits. You're more likely to have young ladies, getting at you or whatever, right? Because you're close by. But when I was in Texas, it was none of that. So let me talk about my story. So in federal prison, I've talked about how there are different things used for money, right? Everything, like we have different things used for money. And at the time, stamps were the money. A book of stamps was equal to, I think at the time it was probably $6. When I first came in, a book of stamps was valued at $5. Over time, it went to a value of $6 and eventually $7. But books of stamps were the money at first, right? It was, if you wanted to purchase something, you purchased with books of stamps. A whole book being $7, half a book being $3.50, or $6 and $3, depending on the time period. So yeah, I was there when I first got in federal prison. Smoking was allowed, right? And people smoked cigarettes. People sold cigarettes. That was a hustle. I had my poker tables. At my poker tables, one of the things that I did when people sat down and played poker with me, I gave out free cigarettes. So while they were there, they could smoke free on the house, as the term comes from that, right? When you hear that term on the house, it comes from the bookies. It comes from casinos. Casinos often give something to keep patrons in place, right? You want them to sit there and lose their money. So if smoking a cigarette is going to keep them in that seat, I'm going to give them cigarettes. So that was one of the things I did. That was one of my tactics. I gave my players cigarettes. So because cigarettes were free. Now along that time, cigarettes weren't free. They were free for my players. But around that time, something changed in the federal system that changed everything. It changed the game. They decided that they were going to take cigarettes off of commissary. Now, when you had cigarettes, you could go buy a carton of Cools, a carton of Marlboros, a carton of Newports. You could buy a can of Bugles, a can of these cheap things that you had to roll your own. So they sold papers and, all of this stuff, right? A lot of people smoke cigarettes, tobacco products. I didn't indulge. but there were a lot of guys who did. So when the federal prisons decided they were going to stop selling cigarettes in federal prison, it changed the game. Now this is how they did this rollout, right? Because they didn't just say, oh, one day we're going to stop. No, what they did was they let us know on such and such date we're going to remove cigarettes from the commissary, right? So they letting you know, all right, if you're going to buy cigarettes, you got until March 1st to buy cigarettes, right? And then whatever the date was, I don't know what the date was, but whatever date it was, they gave you the date that they were going to stop selling cigarettes. So that gave you time to stockpile cigarettes if you were a tobacco smoker, because they were putting you in a position where you was forced to quit, right? Where you were forced to quit. Now, after the stopping period, they said 3 months, I think it was 3 months after they stopped selling cigarettes, there was going to be no more tobacco products on the compound. Meaning whatever you got, you better smoke them, because we're outlawing tobacco products in federal prison. And this came as a shock to many people. Tobacco has always been a part of the system, right? People willed and deal with packs, like it wasn't one of the forms of currency, but it was value. Anything that has value can be used for currency. And tobacco was one of those things that held value, right? So a lot of people were sick behind this change, right? They were sick. It messed a lot of people up. But you had a lot of people who, federal prison is full of hustlers. You got big time, drug dealers in there. Everybody was a kingpin. You didn't have little fish in the federal prisons, right? Everybody was a kingpin. You don't go to the feds if you weren't making money, right? Unless you're from DC, right? And I've explained why DC is a exception to the rule, because DC doesn't have a state prison. They don't have anywhere to send DC inmates. So you go to the feds regardless of what your charge is. If you're a DC inmate, you can have a damn trespassing charge. If you get time, you're going to the feds to serve it. So that was an exception. For the most part, most of the guys in federal prison, were getting money, or were familiar with getting money. They were hustlers. So with me and my hustler mindset, and I'm not a smoker, but I had money. You know what I'm saying? I was penitentiary rich, which is what we call it when you got a lot of stamps, right? And when you got bread coming from the streets, you're penitentiary rich. I was penitentiary rich. So I immediately started thinking, I need to stockpile cigarettes, right? Because once these cigarettes are gone, they're going to be worth more than what they are in commissary right now. And therefore, I started putting away cigarettes, as did a lot of people on the compound. So people started putting away cigarettes. What happened was, let's say the day hit where they took cigarettes off the commissary. All right, now you can't buy cigarettes in commissary anymore. All of the people who weren't able to save up cigarettes had to buy them somewhere. So the people who had been saving cigarettes started selling cigarettes, but at twice the price. So if a pack of cigarettes was $5, you sold it for 10. Then people were selling loose cigarettes. A loosie would cost you, I think it's 20 cigarettes in there. If you sold them at a stamp a piece, you make a book of stamps. So you couldn't do that. It was 2 stamps a cigarette, I guess. So it went up to 4 stamps. And then let's say, as we drew closer to the time where they was going to take them off the commissary, it got higher and higher because less people had cigarettes. Cigarettes became scarce, right? Now me, smarter than the average bear, right? So I had a lot of cartons of cigarettes, and I was clever in how I stashed my cartons of cigarettes, because I had the foresight to know that once that date comes that they take cigarettes off commissary and they're supposed to be gone off the yard, we're going to have a major shakedown, because they're going to come and take all the cigarettes that's still on the compound, right? And this is exactly how it played out. You had all these people who had cigarettes stashed, in their rooms, in their lockers, and wherever they had them, right? And when this major shakedown came, When I tell you it was a major shakedown, they moved everything that was movable in that unit. They made sure they searched everything, right? So they found hundreds, if not thousands, of packs of cigarettes on the yard and confiscated them, right? So if you had cigarettes stashed and they found them, you just lost money. You just lost money because those cigarettes were worth a lot of money. Now, myself, I was clever in stashing my cigarettes. I had a large cache of cigarettes put up. Where I had them, I knew they could not be found, right? And I knew there was this one other guy who was thinking like me. This old dude from the Midwest. Now, where we stashed our cigarettes was in our legal work. At the time, if you went to trial, you pretty much carried your legal work with you everywhere you went because you were fighting your case. So if I transferred to another institution, they would have to transfer my legal work behind me. And I had boxes of legal work, right? Because I went to trial and I was actively fighting. I had, submitted a 2241. I had submitted a 2255. I was trying all these different vehicles to get my sentence overturned, right? So I had my legal work and I realized our legal work was stashed in the back with the unit team, which is not part of the housing unit. It was stashed with the case managers, counsels. They had a room in the back. If we wanted our legal work, we had to go to them because it's locked in this room back there. So it was just myself and this big dude from the Midwest, big old fat grumpy dude, right? He was an old grumpy dude, always grumpy, always frowned up, but he had a store in the unit. He was a hustler, he was an old hustler. But I didn't really rock with him. I didn't really like the old dude. But I knew that old dude was like me. He was really smart, right? And I saw him going to get his legal work probably as often as I was going to get mine. So how we would do it was over that period of time, I would access my legal work and I would have my cigarettes stashed. Like I would compress them down and wrap them in like cellophane from the kitchen, right? I would get these dudes that was working in the kitchen to bring me cellophane, like almost a whole roll of cellophane. I got all this cellophane and I would pack my cigarettes and wrap them real good in that cellophane, and then I would pack all of it in there with my legal work. So I'm using this box. I got a box full of legal work, actually 2 boxes full of legal work, and I had all of these cartons packed in there, right? So they're not allowed to look at your legal work. Staff is not allowed, right? So I knew I was safe with that. And once they did that major shakedown, the yard was dry. The yard was dry, right? So what they did in essence was create a black market for cigarettes. Now cigarettes were worth more than a cap of weed. Like, weed, you sell a little bit of weed in there. It's, a little cap. We call it a cap because it's exactly what it sounds like. A cap was $25, if I'm not mistaken, or $50. And a cap was a chapstick. The chapstick thing, the little white top. The little white top you take off the chapstick. You fill that top up with weed. That was, I think it's $50. It was $25 a cap. I think it was $25 or $50 a cap. I've been gone 10 years, so I don't remember. And then I didn't burn. I sold weed. So I can't remember if it was I'm almost positive it was $25 a cap, right? And it's not a lot at all, right? A cap is, like what I just said, a cap, a chapstick top filled with weed is a cap. That's what they call it. And that's exactly what it is. It's a cap. And it went to where a pack of cigarettes was valued at first it was $50 a pack, right? So you get $50 for a pack. And, you know, I was selling a few at the $50, but then I'm like, nah, I'm going to hold off because I knew it was going to go up. So I wasn't the only one who had cigarettes. There was a few people who had cigarettes on the yard, you know. So I sat on mine a little longer. And then it went up to $100 a pack. And I got like probably about 4 or 5 cartons of cigarettes. So I'm already adding up in my mind how much money I got, right? So I think a carton of cigarettes was like 10 packs, you know, like that's a band a carton, you know. So I'm good. And I done made money already, right? And I still, you know, I still do trade the green, right? I'm penitentiary rich, man. Like, I'm penitentiary rich because they created a black market by doing what they did with the tobacco. So what happened, let me tell you how, because I'm going to use this as a segue into how I got shipped from Petersburg, my home base, right? So I had been there for like 4 years at this time, right? And a guy came, I moved to another unit. My homeboy, my best friend, had went to the camp. Like, this is my homeboy, you know, Bones, right? So Bones had gone to the camp. So I ain't even really had no reason to be in that unit I was in anymore. And I had another homie down in the other unit. And he's like, man, come down here with me, man. So I ended up moving down to another unit. And when I moved to this other unit, I had my own cell, right? How you do that, right? I know people, right? And then I was penitentiary rich. So I had my own cell. But anyway, I go down there and a new dude come on the yard. And he was from Carolina. And I'm from Virginia. But I was born in Carolina. But as far as cars go, I'm Virginia car, right? And this Carolina dude came and he, you know, he had some homies that I rock with. He had a homie that I really messed with named Tony Baloney from Durham. So Tony Baloney was like, man, Cap, man, let my homie come up in there with you, man. We gonna get him. Just ain't nowhere for him to go right now. I don't want him to go in that cell right there because it was like a cell with a punk or something. And, you know, you don't never want to put your homeboy in the cell with a punk. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I'm like, all right, he can come in there. So I know they gonna move him out soon as, you know, they get a cell available or whatever, right? So the dude come in. And at this time, I'm really, you know, I'm from both, really, Virginia and North Carolina. But, you know, just so happened where he's from is a place called Wilson, North Carolina, which is right beside where I'm from, like neighbors, right? So, you know, he did the thing. I'm like, oh yeah, you from Wilson? I said, man, you know such and such? I knew like 1 or 2 people from there. And then he was like, nah, he was like, you know such and such? We went through that. When you know, you go through, you know this dude, you know that dude. That's how you kind of get to know people, right? By who they know. You can find out who they're affiliated with and all that, right? Through those type of conversations. So we went through those motions. And he asked me if I knew somebody that I knew well. I was very familiar with him. I was like, oh yeah, that's my man. You know what I'm saying? He's like, oh, okay, all right. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, yeah. So he didn't really go into detail after that. At that point, he just was asking me if I knew the person. And anyway, you know, we were cool. You know what I'm saying? Like, we ain't had no issues or nothing. Man, a couple days after he moved into my cell, they raided the cell or something. I don't remember. I got caught with a bunch of stamps. I was stamped up. So I probably had got caught with like 30, 40 books. And which is light work, right? That's not a lot. That's like $100, $200, right? And some change maybe. Like, so I got caught with some books. And you're not supposed to have over 2. So I got an incident report, which is a shot, right? Okay, I'm at home. I don't care nothing about them incident reports. So I get an incident report and, you know, they send me to the hole. I know I'm going to get a shot and they're going to, you know, probably give me like a week in the hole. I don't know what they're going to get. I didn't care. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just like, okay, what we going to do? What y'all going to do? And they was like, man, they will give you such and such and such, let you back on the yard. I'm like, all right, that's cool. So when they was about to put me back on the yard, he's like, hold up, we can't put you back on the yard. And I'm like, what you mean you can't put me back on the yard? He said, somebody put separate tees on you. Like, what? What you mean somebody put separatees on me? So separatees or separations is what happened to me when I was in Beckley, West Virginia. 5 guys put separatees on me, and that's how I got shipped from Beckley. 5 guys that told on me. Now, on this yard, on Petersburg, no one is there that told on me. When I got on the yard, there was one guy on the yard who told on me. This new dude named, they called him Whitey. He's from Hickory. And I never saw him. But he saw me, and he went and checked in. He went and checked in because he knew we were in Virginia, you know what I'm saying? And he couldn't go tell that I was on the yard and he couldn't be around me, so he checked in. He checked into the hole because if he would have told on me and they shipped me from the yard, I'm going to send word out of what happened, and then everybody on the yard going to know he's a rat. So instead of doing that, he just went ahead and checked into the hole. Meaning he went to the hole and said, man, y'all got to lock me up. Somebody on the yard I can't be around. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then if you refuse to go in the yard, they got to put you in the chute. So we call that check-in move. He checked in. I found out later the boy checked in. I never even knew he was there. You know what I'm saying? I never saw him or nothing. He saw me, though. Evidently, he saw me, or he got word that I had came on the yard. And again, I'm at home, you know, so when I'm in the shoe, they let me know somebody put separations on me or separatees. I'm like, all right, well, man, I've been here 4 years, yo. Like, whoever it is, man, get them off the yard. You know what I'm saying? They scared, not me. Oh, well, it's not that easy. They said, you're in the hole already. They're on the yard. So if we were both on the yard, that person would have got shipped. But because I was in the hole, I was in segregation already, they decided they had to ship me. I was sick. I was sick. I was so sick. I was crushed. So this individual thought that this is why they shipped me. He went to the SIS lieutenant, which is the Special Investigations Lieutenant, the housing unit. They're like the feds on the compound. That's basically what SIS is. And he told them that he felt that his brother had killed one of my cousins in the streets, and because of that, he couldn't be on the yard with me. And when they told me that, because I was on the investigation, I was in the shoe, I was on the investigation, and they came and they told me, they said, well, we're gonna have to ship you because this guy says that his brother killed your cousin. And I'm like, who is my cousin? Like, what you talking about? He said his brother killed your cousin in Goldsboro, where you're from. I said, man, I don't even know my family in Goldsboro. I'm like, who he killed? Like, I ain't know he ain't killed none of my cousins. All my cousins are still alive, right? The ones, you know, that I know that I'm close with. So, man, they ended up doing the investigation, found out that his brother killed some Jamaican dude from Goldsboro. Like, man, I don't have no Jamaican family members, man. Like, I don't know that dude. Like, so it turned out his brother had killed a dude from Goldsboro, and he thought this dude was related to me. I don't know why, because I said that person that he knew, I knew him Goldsboro. I said, oh, yeah, that's my man. I ain't ever say we was related, but he was with the dude that got killed. They was beefing. And when I said that was my man, I think that's really what he was scared about, is the fact that I said that dude was my people. And he probably was thinking, like, at some point, I'm going to figure out he was beefing with my people, which I didn't care. That stuff happened so long ago. It was like years prior. Like, and then it was in Goldsboro. I were in Wilson, Goldsboro, between one of those towns. I don't know where it happened, but it ain't had nothing to do with me. You know what I'm saying? But either way, they were like, well, the threat assessment is too high for us to release you back on the compound because you might do something to him and then we'll be liable for it. And therefore, they put me in for a transfer. I was sick because I was this close to knocking a chick. This close. I had her. She was already mine. We was just trying to figure out when and how. You know, and when I say a chick, I'm talking about a CO. Like, that is every man's dream behind those walls, right? Is to flip one. I had put in work. extensively. Been working on her. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had her. When I was in the shoe, she even came back there to see me. Like, this is how much I had her. To find out what was going on with me. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, but wasn't in the cards, man. Wasn't in the cards, man. So I got shipped to Beaumont, Texas. And tune in for my next Fair Time stories. I'm gonna tell y'all about Bloody Beaumont. Peace.